I'm Joyce Woodworth. Welcome to the Spirit of Winona. C.G. Mayberry was Winona's premier architect in the late 1800s. He designed our courthouse as well as many of Winona's beautiful, gracious old homes. He also went beyond Winona and designed homes in the other parts of the Midwest. One of these grand homes is in Spring Valley, which is about 20 minutes south of Rochester. Today we're at this Mayberry home and we'll meet Sharon Schmidt, the current owner, who has kindly invited us in for a tour and find out more of its interesting history. We enter the house over the threshold into another era and time. The year is 1893, and from the furnishings in the house, the woodwork, and the wall coverings, nothing tells us otherwise. This is when the house was built for a family named Farmer. The family came from New York and hired Winona architect C.G. Mayberry to design their beautiful Victorian home in Spring Valley. The small room we enter is called an airlock. The tile on the floor is original, and the hall tree tells us a bit about the current occupants. The hats represent the couple who live in this beautifully furnished Victorian home, and the canes tell us they are collectors. A glance into the home shows us that we are stepping into a Victorian dream. We're currently sitting now in Sharon Schmidt's Victorian house in one of her parlors. And actually, Sharon, this has got to be one of the most fantastic Victorian parlors I've ever sat in.
Well, thank you.
It is just beautiful. And welcome to our show today, The Spirit of Winona. It's so nice to have you here, and it's so gracious of you to invite us into your home. Tell us a little bit now about, obviously you have a real love of Victorian furniture and Victorian homes. Tell me how that all developed.
It's actually started collecting dishes, and then we went from there to furniture, and we had a home out in the country that was fairly new with only 8-foot ceilings, so a lot of the crests we couldn't get on. And when our youngest son decided to get married, we decided it was time for us to look for a big, older house. So we ended up buying this house in Spring Valley.
Okay, now I understand this house did not look like this when you bought this.
No, this house was built in 1893, but in 1939 was changed into 6 apartments, and it had sat empty for 10 years. So you can kind of imagine the porch was falling in, the carriage house in back was just totally a mess, and so it took us 10 years of working on it.
So how long has it been now since you've had it finished?
Oh, about 2 or 3 years.
Great.
Since.
And has it met your expectations?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. We've had a lot of help with antique dealers and that to get where we are right now.
When you bought it 12 years ago or 13, whenever it was, it didn't have the woodwork, I understand, because it was split up into 6 apartments. Tell me about your woodwork. Your woodwork is just absolutely fabulous.
After we had purchased the house, we had several antiques we had purchased from Greg Cowles, and so in visiting with him, he said, I know of some woodwork that some people have purchased on an auction, probably I think in '76, and stored it. And he gave us Nick Edstrom's name, and we contacted him, and we purchased the woodwork from him. And I don't know how many loads we brought up here, but we just brought it and put it in. And it took us, I'd say, 2 years of just tearing out walls and things to get the house back to what it originally was as far as doors and that type of thing went.
The woodwork was pulled out of a home in Winona located at 259 West Wabasha Street, which in 1976 was the parish house for Central Lutheran Church. Prior to that, it had been Winona's orphanage. But originally, the home was built for Rodolph McBurney, the first organizer of the Winona YMCA. It was designed by C.G. Mayberry, who also lived in Winona, in a home he also designed just down the street at 77 East Wabasha, and which still exists, with a few modifications.
Now, there was a real surprise with that woodwork, wasn't there? Can you tell me the story about that?
About 3 years ago, we got the original blueprints from a grandson of the fellow that had owned this house, and we were surprised to know that it was the same architect for our house as the house that the woodwork came from, C.G. Mayberry.
I understand that when you brought the woodwork in, it almost like fit the spaces perfectly.
Yes, it did. We had no open staircase in the house at that time, and it's amazing, the chamfered paneling, the railings, the newel posts, everything. It just fit our house.
So the fact that the woodwork fits so perfectly in this house, does it almost seem like perhaps the house in Winona was designed exactly like this house?
Quite a bit. I think there was a very similar look to it. Just that I noticed the pillars on our porch are different with shakes than the pillars on the porch in that house. But the reason for that, I think, is because the fellow that built this house actually came from Upper New York, and he did a porch kind of on the theme of what he would have had there.
The two Mayberry houses are very similar in design. They are both Queen Anne Victorian-style homes with the large gabled roof lines. The Spring Valley home has a rounded turret and arched stonework at the foundation. McBurney's Winona home had more fancy work on the porch and upper level, whereas the porch on the Spring Valley home depicts the shingle style, which is a high-fashion adaptation of the Queen Anne style seen more typically in New York and the New England coastal area.
Which woodwork pieces exactly came from the McBurney home in Winona?
Well, the fireplace mantle right behind us here and the bookcase that is connected to it came from there. Almost all the headers that we have used, our pocket doors in the dining room and in the living room here, all came with that. And we've used some pieces upstairs. The railing for the staircase, the newel posts came with that woodwork. It was actually beautiful cherry woodwork that we've used with the chamfered paneling going right up the staircase also. So when we did the stairs, we had to do wider ones just because it was an inside staircase. So the railing, everything, we did the pitch to go with the woodwork that we had purchased.
And then you talked a little bit about the curving bookcase behind us. Was that something that was part of the whole mantelpiece in the McBurney home, do you think?
Yes, it was, and it would have fit right into a corner. Here we decided to use it with the beam over it, and the beam actually came with woodwork that we had also purchased. So
what an exciting find for you.
It was great because we knew we wanted to restore the house as close as it was originally, and there was no way we could put new woodwork in. So thanks to Greg, we found this woodwork.
Sharon attributes much of her antique finds to Greg Cowles, who, as you may recall, took us on a tour of his fabulous 1860s home in Winona. Greg still has the ability to find anyone the perfect antique furnishing through his Country Comfort Antique Shop at 3rd and Main Street in Winona.
You said that you were storing a lot of this furniture for a long time, and then you had to find the house that fit the furniture. What
Right.
pieces did you have originally, and what pieces did you add once you got the home? For instance, let's talk about the front parlor.
Okay, the front parlor we added after we had the home, and we purchased that from Greg, of course, and it probably came from down south, is what we think. It's a rosewood parlor set, a Charles Baudouin parlor set. So we were real lucky to get that. That's rosewood, and then the center table we also got from Greg. The Etterjay came from him also. And then the really nice piece from Winona is the break front with the H's on each side door at the top. And we know that came from a Huff house down in Winona.
Oh, that is a beautiful piece. That came right out of the Huff home on Huff Street in Winona. It's fabulous. Tell me about some of the actual collections that you have in that room.
We collected bisque figurines for quite a while, so we have a lot of them, mostly German, but some are French. At the top of the corner whatnot, which we found down in Winona at Greg's shop, we have a piano baby too, which would be a German bisque piece. We think this piece also came from the Bernie home. We found it after we had purchased the woodwork, but the cherry wood and the design just fits in perfectly. It's a corner cabinet, but it actually hangs from the top instead of going up from the bottom. So we had to make sure that we had all of our studs in the right place. And I'll open it up and show you. This is how we started in antiques. We started collecting custard glass, and that's what we have in here. And I use all my old dishes except for these sets of custard glass. I never used those.
Why is this called custard glass? What does that mean?
It's just a special kind of glassware that when you hold it up to the light, you can also see that it really fires. It's a very old glass. It was just something that we really liked and just started collecting all different sets of that, table sets, water sets, and berry sets, and just went from there into the other things. Are you interested in the light fixture?
Absolutely.
The light fixture in the front parlor is probably the oldest light fixture that we have, and we took that down to Sumner, Iowa, and had it polished and put that up. After we had that up, we found the sconce on the side wall also that matched perfectly, but we didn't want to do any more wiring, so we just left it that way now.
Tell me a bit about your drapes. They are so Victorian and so lovely. Tell me about those.
Jane Meisner does draperies, and she has a shop in Wyckoff. And so I had an antique dealer from Dodge Center come down, Wendell Nelson, and he also was a decorator. Helped me pick out the draperies. We had already done all the wallpapering and everything, so we got magazines out, and Jane just kind of listened to us and what we wanted, and she said, I've never done anything like this before, but she did an excellent job.
The carpets are so beautiful. I love the way this red one kind of just flows with the red furniture. Tell me a little bit about them.
These are Persian hand-tied carpets. These two in the front parlors we purchased in Dodge Center, and then the one in the dining room came from Mabel. We have a 1917 Kanabi baby grand player piano, which is a lot of fun for us. And for the kids, we buy mostly new rolls to use in that. The parlor set here we actually used when we were living out in the country, which is an old Victorian parlor set. The cabinet to the side of you is actually a butler's cabinet, and that means the drawer would pull out and then it would come down so that they could use that for their desk also. And they probably would have had their dishes on the top open shelves. I have a collection of Japanese Nippon china in there, which is kind of special because Nippon is all hand painted. This piece is called Coraline, which is very ornate, and the way that is made, it's all little beads put together and then fired. So it takes quite a process to get something like that made.
Tell me about the piece behind you, the fellow with the guitar. That's a wonderful piece.
That's a Majelica man, and I just really liked him. I've had him for years, and I guess before in our home we had him sitting on the floor and no one really noticed him, and once we put him up here, he just kind of draws your eye to him.
I think Mr. McBurney would be happy to see him sitting on his bookcase there. Now, I noticed your furniture in here is fabulous. Is everything actually a Victorian piece?
Yes, it is all Victorian. We liked walnut, and we like the Victorian type furniture, and we like a lot of burling too, if we can find that.
Now tell me about your wallpaper. You really have the perfect Victorian paper.
As you know, with an old house, nothing is ever the same. The picture rail was here, but in order to get the border up there, it was too wide for one border, too wide for two borders, so what do? So we ended up, we wallpapered a solid burgundy behind, then we took one border and cut the strip off and put that up next to the ceiling, and then we took that second border and staggered it and flipped it over the other one. So it took a lot of work to get it put together.
Should we talk a bit about your picture?
Oh, sure. This oil here, I actually had a different one up there, and we found this in the shop, and the colors, and of course the little girl was just so neat that I just felt I wanted to put her up there. And it is a very old restored oil that we have.
Lovely.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the lady over there also is a very old one, so I just thought they were kind of neat, I guess, and liked them. In the dining room, we have lincrusta on the walls, which is an old Victorian wall covering. It actually comes from England. It's quite a process to put it on the walls. It has to be cut exact, and then we laid it out on the floor, put water on it, and left it for about half an hour. And then any water that hadn't soaked in, we wiped off. We glued the wallpaper, glued the wall, and then had to hold it up with push pins. It took about a week to get it to all adhere. I kept moving the push pins. Well, then when you pull the pins all out, and when that week was up, I had all these holes to fill. So I filled all the holes with spackling. It looks a lot like linoleum, but it has to be primed with an oil primer. So I primed it with the oil primer, waited a week, put a coat of latex paint on, waited another week and put a little darker coat of latex on and wiped it off to get the old effect that it has. And I really do like that wall
What
covering.
a lot of work. Yeah,
It
it is
was.
beautiful,
Yes.
well worth it.
And then my ceiling, I did something a little different. We did the solid wallpaper, and then I took the border that I had chosen. We put one border up, and then we took that same border and cut all of the burgundy away from it to get the different pattern to it. And to give you some idea, I took a little embroidery scissors, and it took me one whole year. Every night before I went to bed, I just cut a little bit.
Oh.
So it gives you some idea how long it takes to cut one out. And of course, you can get laser cut ones now, but not in the pattern I wanted.
Wow, what a lot of work. This house is not only just your love, but your hobby.
It was a lot of fun, really.
Tell me about the furnishings in the dining room.
The sideboard and the table and the chairs all we purchased from Greg. We had Victorian furniture in our other home, but much smaller, so we ended up selling that and getting these larger ones. And when we purchased the table, we had extra leaves made, so I can extend it way into this parlor if we need to have that bigger one.
Talk about some of your collections in your dining room. I saw you have some pickle jars. Is that what you call them up there?
Pickle casters. And I'm told that years ago everybody would have one of those on their table, and of course the tongs is right there with it, so it was real handy. And I also have a tall, it looks like a vase, but that was for celery. You would have stood your celery right up in that. Some of the silver pieces are kind of unusual. On this end there's a roast container for roast, which you could put your hot water underneath, and then there's a tray for the drippings to go into also, and the cover just folds back kind of to open it up.
And then I saw some lovely vases over on the sideboard. Tell me about them.
Oh yes, there's some vases there with figurines on, and then on the vase part are some cows, and we came from a farm, so those are kind of special to us, and Greg came through again for us with those.
Well, tell me about your chandelier in there. That's incredible.
The chandelier is an old gas chandelier that has been wired, and it came out of a large auditorium. It has a pink cased shade inside, so it is really pretty neat, and it is large.
It is lovely. And how about your dishes on your table? They look very special.
Oh, those are from Greg also, and they're old Paris, so they are very, very old, and there are a lot more pieces than that, but those are the ones that I put out today that fit the table.
Okay, and it looks like you really have a love for plate collecting.
Oh yes, we like plates a lot. So we had several ORS Prussia and then some figurine ones. And then when we were working on the dining room, we had to have a plate rail made because there was no plate rail there. In '39, when they made the apartments, they laid down all oak flooring. The only original hardwood floor is in the dining room. And it has a pattern. It starts out with cherry and then oak, and it goes way to the center of the room. Usually in older homes downstairs there were hardwood floors and upstairs were pine, but this house originally was all pine except for the dining room. We can tell that when they built the house they had wall-to-wall carpeting, which is very unusual for back then. We have area rugs which we thought were right for the house, but we found out they did have the carpeting.
Beyond the dining room is a small walk-through pantry and a swinging door which takes us into the kitchen.
Sharon, I'm happy to see you actually kept the kitchen in the original condition.
Well, we kind of tried to put it back to what it was originally. When we purchased the house, it was a bedroom with a little hallway through to go upstairs and then a closet. But we knew that the original kitchen was here, so we put it back.
Oh, it's lovely. And the sink is great. We have one of these in our basement where it's full of paint, but you've actually restored it.
The sink was actually in the basement, and I wanted to use that even if the plumber thought I was crazy.
This is your old shelf from an old store, right?
This is an old store counter, and actually was twice this long when we bought it, and had stored that for years before we ever had the house, and ended up cutting it in half and putting it in here, and it's very handy. The whole depth of the counter is drawer space, so it stores a lot. There's 15 drawers in it.
And now I'm looking at your chandeliers, and I see something hanging from your chandeliers and your piece on the door frame there. Tell me what that is all about.
That actually is for matches. These are old kerosene light fixtures, and after you had lit it, you would put your burnt match in there so you didn't start a fire.
Oh, clever. Now, was that actually hanging with that, or is it something you just decided to?
It's something that I added to that.
Cute touch. Now, I see you actually have an old refrigerator, or it's not a refrigerator, it's an icebox.
Yes, and I had that years before the house, and it just fit really nice in that spot.
It is perfect. And tell me about your stove.
Well, that actually is a reproduction stove that we got out of Canada.
So you do use that stove?
Yes, it is electric, and the only drawback is that the oven is so small. So I do have another. It has in the top where the warming oven was, it has the timer.
What about the cupboard behind me?
This is kind of neat because it actually is called a Minnesota cupboard, made in Minnesota instead of like a huge Hoosier. And I'll show you here. It has a lot more space probably than what a Hoosier would have. These all open up. Over here we have a door that opens. And then this pulls out, so it's real handy to get to. And this would hold your recipe right there if you were baking. So it's kind of fun and very handy.
How old is this?
Oh, it would have to be over 100 years old or close to 100. Had 3 breadboards here, and the original rolling pin is right there. But the funny thing is we bought this on an auction, and it was painted pink. But even worse yet, it had green plastic poles.
Well, you're kidding. You'd never know.
These were all in one of the drawers, so we were able to use them. But I tried to strip it myself, but I could not get the pink out of it. I had to take it to a professional stripper.
Beautiful job.
And another thing that I maybe should point out is my valances in here. Anyone that grew up on a farm has probably used those as a hand towel. We used to have them on the old roller, and that's what they were. And they're very hard to find now because when I decided to use them as a valance, it took me like 3 years probably to find any of it around.
Clever idea. Tell me about your husband. Does he have the same love and desire for the antiques and the originality as you do?
Yes, I guess that was the fun thing of it, that we both liked the older homes. We both liked the dishes, and that's how we started, was just collecting dishes, and we both liked the older furniture also. And then, of course, he likes carvings and more of the masculine things, too.
Now, I understand that he has a room that has his own personal collections in.
Yes.
Let's take a look at that.
Okay,
Next week, we'll take a look at the more masculine collections of this beautiful home, and we will also go upstairs to see how these tasteful collectors have furnished their Victorian bedrooms. This has been Joyce Woodworth. Please join me again next week for the second part of the Spring Valley Victorian home. Till then, enjoy the Spirit of Winona. This is Joyce Woodworth. Welcome to the Spirit of Winona. In last week's show, we visited with Sharon Schmidt in her beautiful Victorian home in Spring Valley, Minnesota. We toured the downstairs of this grand home, built in 1893 by Winona's architect C.G. Mayberry. After a renovation in 1939, which split the home into 6 apartments, Lauren and Sharon Schmidt purchased the home 13 years ago and restored it to its original splendor. They used woodwork taken from a home in Winona, which used to be the Winona Orphanage, and also a home designed by Mayberry. They discovered that the wood fit perfectly in their Spring Valley home, raising the thought that the 2 homes may have had the same floor plan. They added fretwork to enhance the Victorian look they were after, and they furnished the home in the grandest style of 1893. We begin the second part of the house tour in the downstairs den, where Lauren is able to feature his special collections.
This is my husband's room, Joyce, so you'll see the masculine look in this room. First I'll show you this desk, which is kind of unusual. Probably the person that had this little office right here. Well, now I can't open it.
There we go. Oh my.
Everything is just right enclosed.
Everything he needs is right here.
Right here. This pulls down. I don't know if I can. No, I have the sides too close. But his mail would have been put right through here, and then he would have just sat there and taken it out right here. This is all original. It was for the filing, and they're just made of cardboard. So to be over 100 years old, we're only missing one, which is kind of special, we think. And a lot of times, maybe in a Western movie, you would have seen this type of a desk.
So you figure this is from the West somewhere?
Well, I think they used it out east too, also in an office, but mostly in the movies out west is where you would see them.
It's a gorgeous piece. Looks like he was a fan of John Wayne.
He was really into Black Forest carvings, so that's the reason for the bears here. And then we have a hunt board up here, which was in a landing of a house out in Slayton, Minnesota. All that are Black Forest carving. Then we move over to the fireplace here, and this mantle we found out in Ohio. But the fire screen here we purchased from Greg also. I think originally it would have had tapestry in there, but it probably just deteriorated over the years. I don't know if you've ever seen the ones that are up a little more higher and maybe smaller. I'm told those actually were used a lot by ladies because years ago their makeup was made of wax, and if it got very warm it would melt. So I think these bigger fireplace screens probably were used more, but those were used by the ladies. Over here on this cabinet is our 2 bears that were on newel posts in the house out in Slayton, Minnesota, where we found the hunt board. And then the clock is Black Forest carvings also. And these pieces here, the bears, the pipe holder, and the barometer, and then this is just a little box, are all Black Forest carvings. The pictures on the walls are Grant, Lincoln, and Washington, and my husband is also into Civil War. So he has been, I think, to every battlefield, and we've checked all that out.
And I love the way you've filled in the beams with the wallpaper up here.
Oh, yes.
That's gorgeous.
The beams we put in, they're actually new walnut. Chandelier is an old kerosene light fixture with the jewels on it, and the colored shades are original to the light fixture, which we don't get much light today, but they didn't get much light back then either. Originally they would have pulled it down to light it, but once it's wired it has to be stationary.
Someone had a real flair when they designed that with all the bright
all
colors
the
of the jewels.
Right.
Lovely.
Right.
And then you have sort of more of a Western looking Persian carpet here.
Yes.
Which ties it all together.
We just thought it was more the masculine look, so we ended up using that in here.
Lovely room.
The steps over there would be to reach the books on the top shelves at a library, but it also will flip over and it has a cane seat. It makes it into a chair.
Wow.
So it's kind of a fun piece.
You've got everything absolutely perfect.
Oh, well, thank you.
We leave the Civil War, Black Forest, and Western themed room to head back up the beautiful walnut stairway. There's a lovely stained glass window at the turn of the stairs. And at the top is a hallway. An open parlor is off to the left, and above the entrance is some very ornate fretwork. The parlor is a lovely corner reading room, which holds a small captain's desk with side drawers and a lovely Victorian settee.
Well, now we're standing up on the landing of Sharon's home on the second floor, and this is a perfect example of the new with the old. It looks like you installed part of this floor, which is new, correct?
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
We purchased the walnut flooring up in the cities, and while we were up there, we ordered the center medallion here to be made. And when we got it, it was a little smaller than what we thought we wanted, so we ended up putting a little more bird's eye and walnut around that, and centered it right under the light so that it would show up.
Lovely. And your wallpapering is great. I mean, the fact that you've got wallpaper in your ceiling and it's mitered perfectly in the corner.
Yes, we were real impressed with the fellow that we had do it. He did an excellent job. He did one strip one way and one the other, and ended up with the mitered corner, and everything is centered. And then we have a large fan over our staircase, and while he had the scaffolding out there, my husband, an electrician, crawled up and hung the fan. And the fan actually is an old fan too that we've had restored.
Oh,
So
everything
it's
is
kind
old
of fun.
and original. Perfect.
Right.
And this is a great example of the McBurney wood.
Yes, this was all with the woodwork that we purchased in Winona, and it fit in just perfect. We have the chamfered paneling coming up the staircase and all around in this hall.
Why do they call it chamfered? What does that mean?
It's the squares here that go, they aren't flat. They have a 3D type effect to them, so we call it chamfered.
And it goes around the corner. You have all of this. So do you think this was all on the second floor of the McBurney home as well?
Yes, I think it probably was. I just think that in that house too, it just followed around in the hall.
And you have some lovely sitting areas, and then you have this great, I see you have kind of a collection of these wonderful lamps.
Yes, we kind of went through that phase too when we were out looking for these lamps. And they are beautiful when they're lit. They're called reverse painted lamps, meaning they're painted on the inside of the shade. When they're not lit, they're not near as perfect. And then under this lamp is a collection of wave crest. We have a letter holder, kind of a large jewelry box, and then some other little pin trays also.
Lovely.
Our master bedroom right behind us has the turret that from outside that goes up, so it has a rounded wall in it, which is kind of fun. And actually in the original house there was a fireplace here. I refinished a fireplace mantle to put in here, but ended up I couldn't use it because we didn't have any wall space for our bed. The bedroom set actually is a whole set, the bed, the armoire, dresser, and commode, and that also we had purchased from Greg years ago and ended up using in this bedroom, which is our bedroom now. And you notice the curved wall which fits the turret, so it was a little hard getting furniture in here. So that's the reason that the desk is kind of sitting at an angle, and that is actually a lady's roll top desk, and it comes in pretty handy for just little things that I want to do when I'm up in the bedroom. And then also, if you want to follow me in here to this bathroom, we tried to restore it to an old bathroom. The commode is actually an old commode where the top would have flipped up and you would have kept your pitcher and bowl in there. But we just made it a little handier and put our sink in there. But above that, we took an old organ top and added a shelf on the bottom and used that for the mirror over the vanity. And then we did our tub with the actual brass rod for the curtain. So it's kind of a fun old bathroom.
The corner room in the house is a lovely guest room, decorated in a deep rose color with a contrasting white, lacy Victorian bedspread.
So to start with, it's kind of a nightmare room for me because I ordered the wallpaper, had a paint mixed for the woodwork, did all the painting, put the wallpaper up, and it was a hot pink paint and looked awful. And in order to get the color on the woodwork, I painted 5 coats of paint. We finally just dumped our paint and started all over from scratch. But this bed is a half teaster bed, which means half a canopy, and actually should have a curtain on it if I get around to it. And you would have let that down at night so you kept the bugs off, and then tied it back during the daytime. It probably came from down south, and this also is another piece from Greg. The armoire over there is kind of unusual because it has the mirror that is so heavy that we have it wired to the wall. Otherwise, when you open the door, it would flip it right over. The oil painting there is the oil painting we had out on the farm in our daughter's bedroom, and I just like the little girl. This chest I will show you because I actually think it was probably in a room that someone rented years ago. It would have been their chest of drawers, and it also would have made into a desk. So it was pretty functional.
Beautiful piece. The colors on it are just gorgeous.
The corner guest room is steps away from the hall bathroom, which could be made private by its own door on the inside next to the clawfoot tub. This porcelain tub is unusual with its brass feet. Above the marble-top commode hangs an antique brass mirror with converted gas globe lanterns. Hanging from the ceiling is a prism brass lantern with Sharon's signature match collector hanging off of the side. Again, the ceiling is wallpapered with a frilly floral design typical of the Victorian era.
We did a cherry floor in here just to have something a little different. I have a figured ceiling because a lot of times years ago they did that, but it was very hard doing. And we also have an interesting piece. This is an old dental cabinet, which is perfect for storing cosmetics, and that comes in very handy. These all flip out, so it is really easy to get to. And then when the dentist had it, he would have pulled this out to put his little tools on, and also on the side was a rod that you pulled out to hang his towel. So everything back then was really pretty functional. And then over the toilet is something else that's kind of interesting. It's an old cabinet for shaving mugs that would have been in a barber shop. And I do have old shaving mugs in there just because that's what it was used for years ago.
As in every grand Victorian home, the front of the house held the larger, more ornate bedrooms, and at the back of the house, smaller bedrooms were usually designed for the maids' quarters.
And as we go through this door, we are entering the maids' quarters. And if you notice, the ceiling comes down about a couple inches, which was very, very likely to be that way back years ago. And then we tried to scale this part of the house down a little bit. We did mostly painting. This is rag rolling in this room. Behind the door is an old linen press, which has shelves in it, and they would have kept their linens in there.
Okay, so you have 2 bedrooms for the maids' quarters here. Let's take a peek at these.
Okay.
Sharon, you surely didn't scale down these rooms. This is a lovely room. Anyone would love to stay in this room.
Well, it's just that we did the painting instead of the wallpaper.
Sure.
But This is a bedroom set, actually the bedroom set that we used when we were out on the farm, the dresser, commode, and the bed. The little chest on this side is a lingerie chest. Over here is another reverse painted lamp, which we really liked, and it has a bell-shaped shade. The prints on the corner there are old advertising prints. Probably, we don't know what for, but maybe cigars or something like that. There's a hook on the back of that medallion, and it just hooks over the picture rail. Much easier than pounding holes all over.
Sure, good idea. Very Victorian idea, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Perfect little girl's room. This is just beautiful. Any girl would love to have this. And you've got dolls all over the place. Tell me about your doll collection.
Well, I like the old dolls. Most of them are German dolls. Here's just one that I just think is kind of special. She just has the look. And the lady that I purchased most of my dolls from has restored the clothes and everything to what they probably would have been back then. So it's just a fun thing. And my granddaughters do like coming into this room.
I can see why.
But
definitely.
they are definitely real good about not touching the dolls, being I have told them that they're not to touch.
Sure.
But this room they do really like because they use the bathroom off here, and then we have the little child's dresser, which the mirror is just in the right spot for them. And then all the little toy dishes, which I just wonder if these kids played with them, because I don't think I would have had them in this good a condition if I would have been playing with them all these years.
This is an unusual collection back here. Describe this to me.
This collection is of brush dolls. They would have been on the dressers, and you would have used them to take the lint off of your clothes. And over on this other stand are pincushion dolls, which would have held your hat pins or stick pins years ago.
Darling, and I love the floral wallpaper that you chose for this room. Perfect little girl's room.
Yes, it is. I really do like this light, airy room. And then we went with the iron bed just because we thought we do have a lot of wood. My husband is real partial to wood, but this just gave a little variety to it.
Well, we're ending the tour today at the top of the stairway that we found out of the McBurney home. This is the actual wood, that they pulled out of the McBurney home from Winona, and that's actually the connection, what brought me here to Spring Valley. But I have to tell you, Sharon, this tour has been just fantastic. Everywhere I look, I see something Victorian, something beautiful, something old. Tell me, though, what it was like for you to put it all together.
Well, it was fun, but you have those times when you're kind of down too and wonder what I'm doing. We just had one walk through the house before we purchased it, but we kind of had a feel for the house right away. We've toured several older homes, and whenever we're on vacation, that's what we do. So we knew we wanted to do this. We knew we didn't want to put in new, and it was just a wonderful thing that Greg knew of this woodwork that we could put in the house, because it just made the house really back to what it was in 1893 when it was built.
Okay, and I want to thank you so much for the tour and showing us all your unique treasures.
Thank you. I was glad to have you visit.
Thanks, Sharon. And thanks for joining me today. Please join me again next week. Till then, enjoy the Spirit of Winona.